Welcome to Learning Adda. How to build confidence. Natasha was a shy and quiet girl. At 20 years old, she lived alone in a small, cozy apartment in the city. She had a job at a local bookstore, a place she loved because it was filled with the stories she adored. But despite her love for books, Natasha often felt nervous when she had to talk to customers or interact with her colleagues. She would feel her heart race, her palms would sweat, and sometimes she would even stumble over her words. Natasha knew she needed to be more confident, but she didn't know where to start. One bright Saturday morning, feeling particularly down, Natasha decided to visit her grandmother, who lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of the city. Her grandmother was known for her wisdom and her calming presence. Whenever Natasha had a problem, her grandmother always seemed to know the right thing to say. As Natasha walked through the garden to her grandmother's house, she felt a sense of peace. The garden was full of vibrant flowers, roses, daisies, and sunflowers, each one blooming beautifully in the summer sun. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers, and the sound of birds chirping made everything seem a little bit brighter. Natasha found her grandmother sitting in the garden, sipping a cup of tea. She was wearing her favorite blue shawl and had a gentle smile on her face. Natasha sat down beside her and sighed deeply. "Grandma, I don't know what to do," Natasha began, her voice filled with frustration. "I want to be more confident, but I always feel so nervous. I'm afraid to speak up at work, and I don't know how to change that." Her grandmother listened carefully, nodding her head as Natasha spoke. After a moment, she reached out and took Natasha's hand. "Natasha, my dear, confidence is not something you find overnight. It's something you build, little by little, just like how a garden grows. You don't see the flowers bloom immediately, do you? It takes time, care, and patience." Natasha looked at her grandmother, trying to understand what she meant. "But how do I start, Grandma? How do I make myself feel confident when I don't?" Her grandmother smiled softly and said, "Start with small steps. Every day, do something that makes you feel a little braver. It doesn't have to be big. Stand tall when you walk, look people in the eye when you talk to them, and speak slowly and clearly. These are small things, but they are the seeds of confidence." Natasha nodded slowly, absorbing her grandmother's words. "But what if I'm too scared to even do those things?" Her grandmother squeezed her hand gently. "Then start even smaller. Think about the things you are already good at. Make a list of them. It could be anything, like how you always keep your apartment so neat, or how you can recommend the perfect book to a customer. Every time you feel nervous, look at that list and remind yourself of your strengths. This will help you believe in yourself." Natasha thought about it. She realized that she was indeed good at many things, but she had never really acknowledged them. She always focused on what she couldn't do rather than what she could. "I think I can do that," she said, feeling a little more hopeful. Her grandmother continued, And remember, my dear, it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes them, even the most confident people. The important thing is not to be too hard on yourself when you do. Instead, learn from your mistakes and use them as a way to grow. Natasha felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had always been afraid of making mistakes, thinking they meant she wasn't good enough. But hearing her grandmother's perspective made her realize that mistakes were just part of the learning process. Over the next few weeks, Natasha began to follow her grandmother's advice. She wrote a list of things she was good at and kept it in her pocket. Every morning before work, she would look at the list and remind herself of her strengths. She also started practicing walking with her head held high, making eye contact with people, and speaking clearly. At first, it was difficult. Natasha often felt her old nerves creeping in. But she kept pushing herself, even if it was just a little bit each day. She noticed that when she walked with confidence, people treated her differently. They smiled at her more, and her colleagues at the bookstore started to listen to her ideas more closely. One day, the manager at the bookstore announced that there would be a meeting, and everyone was expected to share their thoughts on how to improve the store. Natasha felt her heart race at the thought of speaking in front of everyone, but she remembered her grandmother's words. She took a deep breath, stood tall, and reminded herself of the list in her pocket. When it was Natasha's turn to speak, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach, but she didn't let it stop her. She spoke clearly, sharing her ideas about organizing the books in a new way that would make it easier for customers to find what they were looking for. As she spoke, she noticed her colleagues nodding in agreement, and when she finished, they all applauded her ideas. Her manager even said, "Great job, Natasha. That's a brilliant idea. We'll start implementing it right away." Natasha couldn't believe it. She had done it. She had spoken up, and people had listened. That evening, as she walked home, she felt a sense of pride that she had never felt before. She called her grandmother as soon as she got home. "Grandma, I did it. I spoke up at the meeting, and everyone liked my ideas. I feel so much more confident now." Her grandmother's voice was filled with joy. "I'm so proud of you, Natasha. You've taken the first big step, and now you know that you can do it." Confidence isn't about being perfect, it's about believing in yourself and not being afraid to try. Natasha smiled as she sat down on her bed. She realized that confidence wasn't something that came all at once, it was something that grew with each small step she took. She still felt nervous sometimes, but now she knew that was okay. She was learning, growing, and becoming the confident woman she always wanted to be. From that day on, Natasha continued to practice the small steps her grandmother had taught her. She started taking on more responsibilities at work, volunteering to lead projects, and even making new friends. Each time she did something new, she felt her confidence grow a little more. And whenever she felt doubt creeping in, She would think back to her grandmother's words and remember that confidence, like a garden, takes time to grow. But with care, patience, and a little bit of courage, it would bloom beautifully, just like the flowers in her grandmother's garden. Thank you for the watching.